Hey, what's happening?
Hey, let me just mute the stream. Um,
Uh, yeah, no, welcome. What's up? What you got?
um, so yeah, I just did all your verification process, and I put question on the first document, although I'm not necessarily sure I disagree with what's in there. It was a question around that, so I just did
Yeah,
that.
I'll clear. What I'm gonna do this week is I'm gonna go back over the verification process. Yeah, like I that's specifically for like if you don't like have necessarily like a overt disagreement with me, but like
Yeah,
you
it's
know if
more like
you
yeah,
yeah if you just have like a question about how like it works in practice or like all that sort of stuff.
it's not even around. It's just like that's what I'm saying. Like it's about that, but it's not really about like the theory of you'll see what I mean. So I just
Okay,
want to be clear, like this isn't something this is something I feel, and it's more of a question than a position I'm married to.
okay.
Um, it might be a bit of a controversial like thing for me to talk about. I hope not. I don't see myself as like a transphobe or whatever. It's just something I'm feeling, and I thought you'd be a good person to ask about it, and you could steer me in the right direction about it.
Wait, so
Um,
are you like saying that like oh I might be like a trans person and you're kind of like working through that?
no, no, not at all.
Okay.
So I've been starting to feel and like have concerns. I don't really know if there's a solution to this, but like
Hmm?
it feels to me like as like the trying to be really careful what I say, like
You're all good.
as trans people are being talked about more and more and more,
Hmm?
I start worrying, and I can speak to my own experience about this. So I start worrying that people get because I'm depressed now, but I used to be like really depressed, and when I was really depressed, I started to think like, oh, maybe I'm trans, like, oh, maybe I'm like non-binary. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if
Sure.
that's like, and I'm starting to worry that I feel there's like people around me that are like deciding they're trans when they might just be depressed, and I'm worrying that the proliferation of that is then leading people down these roads when they're maybe not trans. I don't really know what the solution to that is, or if that's even true. If that's just a feeling I have. Um, I don't know, like whether there's a way, like there doesn't seem to be a way that a doctor can truly like tell, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know? You go from there, I guess. That's
Yeah.
just
I mean, I kind of get what you're saying. Like, it's hard when there's a lot of people who are going around saying, like, oh, gender is whatever you want it to be. Because, like, sure, it could be imaginable to think that, or I could see how, like, a reasonable person could take that to mean that, like, oh, well, that must mean that there's going to be, like, some people who are depressed who are going to take that, who are going to, like, oh, well, there's this thing that people are talking about, it's trans, and oh my God, all it is self-identity. So
yeah.
I can just do
Maybe
that.
it's this, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than dealing with like a depression or whatever. That's
Right.
my kind of worry.
And
Because like people like there's people around me that like they want to get like a mastectomy, and I'm like you like have Tourette's and are also depressed. Like I think that's probably more the issue than
yeah, so like
yeah. I don't know.
the first thing to
It could
always
be, but
remember,
yeah.
yeah, so like the first thing, and this is I don't think that there's anyone who's ever affirmed anything to the contrary of this. But like
Okay.
the first thing to always tell people is that like listen, don't look at being trans as like the thing that's going to solve your other problems, whether it's depression
Yeah.
or whether it's like some kind of other external like third factor, right? Like you should always make efforts to try and resolve those issues internally without
Mhm.
bringing in like transition or something like that, like regardless of whether or not you are trans.
Mhm.
Like that should always be like step one, because like you could be depressed and you could be trans and then you transition. It's like, what the fuck? I still have depression. It's like, well, yeah, of course you still
Yeah.
have fucking depression. Because like transitioning doesn't solve all of your problems. So like that's,
Would you advocate for like working through like depression and the Tourette's or whatever as best as you can before
um,
deciding to like think about the trans and transition stuff, or what would you say to that?
I think you just have to be careful. It's going to depend a lot on like people's individual places in life because you could like, let's construct like a hypothetical situation where,
Like, sorry, just something quick so I can really explain. Like, I don't know if you've been following like the self-diagnosis stuff.
mm,
Like, I started worrying that what happens, and it's kind of a similar thing,
yeah,
I guess, is that like people will read about like trans stuff or like a medical condition online, and then they'll read about it, and then they'll start to convince themselves that they are, and then like speaking about like the medical self-diagnosis thing or whatever.
yeah,
Then when a doc, because I'm quite a hypochondriac, and I probably engage with some of this too. I want to go to the doctor. I think I start to convince myself that I have this issue, and then when they ask me questions about stuff, I'm probably like overthinking and thinking like, oh yeah, I have that. When in reality, it's probably not that. It's just that I'm like being a hypochondriac and overthinking. And I
Yeah.
worry that kind of similar stuff starts to happen. People read about it and then they start to like see things. Like it's almost, I don't know. It's like this is the only analogy I can give. It's like when you get it's like when you get a new car and then suddenly you see it everywhere. It's like
Mm.
this car's always been there, but you've never seen it before. But then once you start thinking about it, you start going down these like mental inroads that start making you see things that you wouldn't have noticed before.
Mm. Yeah. So
Yeah,
basically, like, so there's a couple layers, right? The
yeah,
first is like to make sure that we're not entangling being trans and having dysphoria, right? Like that's kind of like step one, because there are going to be a lot of trans people who have dysphoria or some kind of other issue like depression or anxiety or whatever, like you mentioned.
hmm
But like step one is to kind of like disentangle those things, right? Because I
Are you,
think
are
it,
you saying there are trans people that wouldn't? Are you saying the reason we should untangle it is because there are trans people who don't feel dysphoria? Or maybe
um,
I'm confused.
yeah, like again, this is kind of why I focus on like intrinsic inclinations. But the reason why is because like generally speaking, we have two different ways of acquiring gender affirming care in our country. The first way
Yeah,
being generally going through like a um, oh, it's not a psychiatrist. It's going through a therapist to help you
yeah,
work through your issues, which I think
yeah.
is good for a lot of people. In my opinion, is that like everyone should. I don't know. I think that therapy is good generally for everyone, and you should
I
probably go to a
think
therapist if
my
you are able
position
to.
is that if you could afford it, you should do it every week of your life.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know why you wouldn't. Like to me, it's that whole thing where like, why people go see a therapist and they get better and then they stop if they can still afford it. I don't understand. It just makes zero sense. Like, it's
mhm,
like it's like going to the gym for a little bit and then just stopping because you finally got to somewhere good. Like, as soon as you stop going to therapy, you could just get worse again. I mean, there's some people who seem to be able to just go to therapy once and then they're fine. But
mhm.
I mean, personally for me, I'm like worse off, so I definitely feel like I need a lot of therapy. But I just don't know why you wouldn't. It's just so beneficial in so many ways. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
but
mean, like
like,
a
there's
lot of
some
people.
people who, sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
there's some people who would say that um, I don't know if you agree with this, but there are some people, right, that would say that if you shouldn't have to go to therapy or you shouldn't have to answer to a therapist or a psychotherapist or a doctor or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. So basically, again, like so, disentangling a lot of this. So like, the reason I'll address that in like just, but like the first kind of step is like the reason I kind of disentangle like being trans and having dysphoria and other issues because like I think that people are largely fine if they go to like, for example, get informed consent. If they don't have things like dysphoria, but like for if you have another issue, I would always say that you have to go, or I would always recommend that you go to therapy to the extent that you are able to. But then like the other problem
Okay.
is that like the reason, if I'm being like super charitable,
Sorry. What did you mean by informed consent?
so basically, informed consent is a process where, and this is what I did
Because I know what it means, but I just don't know what context you're using it in. That's
yeah.
all good.
So informed consent, usually how it works. I mean, I can just talk from my own personal experience, right?
Hmm.
Usually, how it plays out is that instead of needing to talk to a therapist, I'd still talk to a therapist because I was in a position where I was able to. But instead of needing to talk to a therapist, you could go to a clinic where basically you would show up. They would take your blood work to make sure that you'd be safe to take a medication, like as far as your physiology is concerned, and then they would
Hmm.
give you a paper that would tell you exactly what hormone replacement therapy would do.
Hmm.
And what all the expected like side effects are of it, and they would say, "All right, we're going to give you this. Come back in 2 weeks with this signed, if you still want to pursue." And so that's like informed consent. It's like they're informing you about what this is going to do. They're
You're
running tests on
taking
you.
the risk. Is that
Yeah,
like you're taking? But
you're
like, do
taking the
we
risk.
trust people to take the risk, and then because maybe it's not a risk they should take? Like,
Well, here, this is why I kind of I want to disentangle like being trans and having dysphoria because or having like extreme dysphoria because like
hmm
I was relatively like it's a weird example, right? Where it's like I was reasonably like in a lot of ways mentally healthy. Like I was functioning, I was at like a decently high performing or I shouldn't say this. I did have dysphoria to
hmm
a moderate extent, but not to the point where it was like debilitating my life and I otherwise didn't have like depression or anything else on top of it. Like I was a
Okay.
pretty high functioning, healthy person. And so like I felt I was in a position where I could be able to provide informed consent. I understood exactly what I was doing. I was I was in like a pretty healthy place in basically every other like way that I could measure it in my life, you know?
This is where I struggle though, because some people would say that if you like that's gatekeeping, right? If you
Well,
gatekeep it from someone because of they have like not good mental health, you know what I mean?
yeah. And so like here, this is the reason why so like the reason I think that a lot of people are upset is because, or like not upset, the reason a lot of people would like call that gatekeeping is because like there are flaws with
Yeah, of course,
our
yeah.
medical system, right? Like there are, for example, when I was looking at therapists, right? I was living in the South. And so like I did have to be conscientious about like, you know, was I going to go to a therapist who was just basically going to try and push back as hard as they could against, you know, being trans when it's like, no, I knew what was up, you know, or like someone who was going to like drag it out for months and cost me and like charge me a ton of money because like therapy is expensive, you know? And so like the problem is that like while everyone should be going to therapy, there are a lot of hurdles that people have to overcome by virtue of like flaws in our medical system that can sometimes make that harder to do. And so like while like the prescription that I would make is that like everyone should go to therapy if you have like depression or some kind of other issue, and also if you have like really really bad dysphoria, just like work it out and make sure that isn't something else. Unless you've done like a ton of introspection, it's going to be hard to know exactly like how to tell
So I
what that
bet
is.
some people entangle like depression and dysphoria because I've heard that dysphoria can kind of feel a bit like depression because you're sort of like obviously upset in your own experience, which is obviously it's not
Yeah,
the same as depression, but it's that similar kind of not feeling like you belong or you know you understand yourself. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think that my position right now is that if you have any suspicion that could be the case, then you should go and you should try to go to a therapist if you're able to.
Okay, cool.
I think that's
Good.
basically it. Like if you have like any like if there's any shred of doubt in your mind, then you should really try to make sure that that's not a mistake that you're gonna make. You know.
Okay, good. Yeah, I agree
And
with that.
so like but you know if like you're reasonably certain that like you know you just have this worry and you know for a fact that it's like nothing else, you know, like you've done a super ton of introspection and you're like in a decently healthy spot, then you know then I think that informed consent can be fine because that's what I did, and I've turned out like I've been great, you know, that's been awesome for me. And so like but going back to the conversation about like going to therapy, so like I would always prescribe that like people should try to go to therapy if they can, but also acknowledge that like since there are flaws in our system, since not every therapist is created equal, since sometimes it can cost a lot and people might not have the money or resources to be able to access that, since sometimes there might just be a not a good therapist in your area, you know, people might live out in the country and they're not able to like reasonably access a good gender therapist even near them, or any gender therapist near them. Like there's a lot of problems that people kind of have to overcome. And so like for some people, it may be like a necessary evil that they have to go with something like do it yourself HRT or informed consent, even if they have other problems, right? Like there, it's kind of like, I'm
Because
not
of
going to,
how things are currently situated, whereas if we were in a world where we knew that there was a good system that people could go to, then they wouldn't need to go to those things.
yeah, exactly. But like
Yeah.
then in those situations, the prescription would be like the moment that their life situation changes where they're able to go and seek therapy and like work through those issues, then I would say immediately do that. But like, you know, if you're in a shitty situation where it's like, oh, you know, if I don't get HRT, I'm going to fucking kill myself. And I have no way of being able to go and get therapy, even though I'm dealing with other problems, then like, you know, there it's like, it's a shitty situation and it might be necessary that you pursue like do it yourself HRT. But we're also acknowledging that like, that's a shitty situation that, you know, we probably want to, not probably, we want to avoid to the extent that we're able to.
But we would also concede that, like, with that situation being the case, there are going to be like at least a fair amount of cases of people that are like doing that probably are not the people that shouldn't be doing it because it's not what they need.
Yeah, like detransitioners do exist. Like it does happen.
Yeah.
That's probably like a big explanatory factor for why that's the case, right? Like it really sucks. And so like
Yeah.
the goal
And obviously
of
it's used like really, like obviously right-wing people will obviously use that as like a case to show like, you know, well, they're bullshit. But
yeah, even
yeah,
though it's
I
ironic
understand.
because like
Yeah.
in that instance, like that's like really good evidence to show like why we need like good healthcare reform, which a lot of conservatives are
Yeah,
against.
it's funny because it's similar to kind of the abortion like discussion. It's like if you're not providing like good access, then people are going to take shitty avenues. Whereas if you provided like a really good like streamlined way of having abortions, or in this situation like a good way for people to, I don't know, find out more about, figure out stuff with their trans like issues and deal with them in a better channel, then obviously they wouldn't need to just order HRT off the internet.
Right. I think that like a better example with the abortion thing is that like a lot of people are like, oh, we can't have any abortion. But then you ask them like, okay, so are you going to like support any kind of like a social welfare program to like help out people who are struggling, like single parents who end up having these children? And then they immediately are like, oh, what?
Yeah.
No, fuck that.
Yeah.
It's like they're going to impose these, they're going to impose a burden of raising another child or children onto parents and not provide them any meaningful way to be able to provide for themselves, which is always pretty shitty.
Or immigration. I honestly, like, it feels like this whole you could literally use this format for like everything. It's like wrong with that, like side of thinking.
Yeah. No, it sucks. But yeah, so I don't know, does that kind of like help with does that answer that question?
So basically, if I'm to sum up what you're saying in regards to my question, that you're not worried too much about it because
I mean, like
you don't control everyone, but like not. I'm thinking. I hadn't finished what I was saying.
Okay.
Your position, obviously, you don't control everyone in the world, right? But your position is that obviously, if there's a potential other issue, then they should go and do that help. But I suppose my problem is that I don't think people are doing that. But
yeah,
if that's your position, then yeah, I obviously agree with it. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess that like my position would be like if you are if you think there's a possibility that something else is motivating that desire to like get HRT and like go through transition that's not necessarily related to like being trans but is caused by like depression or something else, like if you have any suspicion with that, you should pursue therapy if you're able to. And then if you're not able to pursue therapy for cost prohibitive reasons or because of where you live or whatever, then you can look into like it's a shitty situation, but then it could be like justified to go through like do it yourself kind of procedures, but understanding that like there is not like you're now assuming like a greater degree of risk because you're not consulting medical professionals. So like there's a greater possibility that like you could eventually realize, oh shit, actually this was not being trans, this was actually just depression, and there's a greater risk of you detransitioning or possibly regretting what you do later on.
Yeah, I suppose so. If I knew, for instance, that every trans person every potential trans person or someone was thinking about it, was stumbling like over your stream and they were getting that advice, then I'd probably feel pretty fine. But I know that they're probably entering like probably like hearing nothing about that and just like, or just more radical perspectives, which seems to be quite prolific about just ordering it off the internet immediately without any kind of introspection about any other issue that it could be. I know that your position obviously would be not to do that, but yeah, I'd be curious, I guess, how can we like minimize that? I don't know. Yeah,
I mean,
but
well, the problem is that like the advice I'm giving, while I think it's good, I don't know, like a big problem online is that like people don't really go online to find people to give them the best advice. People go online to find people who will give them the advice that they want to hear, right? That's
yeah.
Like that's the
that's
biggest
not why I
issue.
go online, but yeah.
Like that's the reason why. So we were reacting to Demon Mama earlier. Like that's the reason she's so popular is because like she doesn't get into nuanced arguments. People don't largely like this isn't the case for everyone, but like most people don't actually want like a really in-depth like meaningful conversation between her and the people she's talking to. She just wants them to dunk on them and affirm.
I just want to shit first, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so like
it's I actually like find it less entertaining because it's just people like screaming at each other. It's like they actually have a discussion that's like something interesting.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's so much more interesting, and you actually learn more.
Yeah. But I mean, like I don't know, you have to be like emotionally mature and like want to learn, and also like, and I'm gonna like, I want to be more charitable to the people who are like that. There are some people who are in just like really shitty positions in life,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, maybe you have like a trans person who's young and who comes from like a super conservative family, and all that they are told day in and day out is, oh, trans people are freaks or whatever, and they just
Mm-hmm.
constantly hear like anti-LGBT yada yada yada, and they don't really have any escape from it. Then it's understandable why people would want to be able to go somewhere where they know with absolute certainty that they're going to have someone to basically affirm everything that they believe,
Of
because like,
course, yeah.
like the conversations that you're talking about introduce a risk of someone presenting an opinion that they could be wrong about, and that
Mm-hmm.
can be threatening to people who are from more compromised positions. And it's like, well, what they want is just they, or I mean, it's not even what they want. What they need is just like a safe space on the internet where they don't have to constantly worry about that, right? Like, I'm interested in learning about this stuff because not only do I do advocacy, but also like I like these
You're just
conversations.
intellectually interested by them. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, but
I suppose it
like,
just like, so I
yeah,
suppose in my ideal world, because it really scares me that like Demon Mama is basically saying she's not doing panels anymore, she's not going to be engaging anyone else, and like that to me is like really scary. And like the fact that
yeah,
basically what like Hassan, for instance, doesn't really engage with anyone. He has like such a massive influence. It's
yeah,
really scary to me that these people can basically just create like essentially a demagogue audience that
yeah,
like, and their views and stuff will never challenge. So in my ideal world, like I think if you're gonna, if you just want to talk about video games or like movies or whatever, fine. But as soon as you start engaging in, political discussions, let alone like life-changing stuff like, trans issues, I think you should you should
right. But the
have
good
to
news is,
you should
like,
have to have debates in my world. You should have to be debating people
yeah, no,
constantly.
what I will say is that like the good news is that right now a lot of the statistics that are out show that like for people who go through like HRT or like surgery or whatnot, like most people have overwhelmingly positive like responses to this. So
Hmm.
so like at least at the moment, it doesn't seem like it's as big an issue. But I do agree that like given the way that this landscape is sort of changing, that it's we should be vigilant and make sure that this doesn't like become a problem. But at least currently, it doesn't seem to be like as big of an issue. Um,
Yeah.
which is a nice kind of like starting point. Just
Hmm.
like a matter of like going forward, like if there are people who are like acting irresponsibly, then we want to try and make reasonable attempts to like correct that misinformation and like make sure that we're affirming like healthy practices in people. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably why I like watching Destiny so much because you will literally debate anyone about anything, and then
yeah,
it kind of shows the best like position. So it really scares me when people like decide that they don't want to debate anymore because they just create like echo chambers of
hmm oh yeah.
yeah.
No, I like, and I deeply appreciate that. I'm still like
Mm,
figuring out like my system for engagement because I used to do like a very similar like, oh, I'm just gonna debate everyone. And mind you, like I
mm,
don't mind talking through disagreements with people. It's just like, I don't know, like it's really weird that like there could be people, oh, like the Doe person, like when the Kink at Pride Saga Part 2 Electric Boogaloo started back up, like that was
yeah.
explicitly them like just resurrecting a month old discourse to explicitly to harass me. And then I tried talking about it in stream, and they're like, "Oh, bring me on to talk to me." And I'm like, "Fuck that! You're trying to like, no, you're like a piece of a shit."
Gaslight me. Yeah.
Whereas like with Destiny, like he would absolutely talk to that. Like if he were in my situation, I know that he would talk to that person because he doesn't really care. He doesn't let it get to him.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
like he just doesn't give like he gives zero fucks. And I don't know how
Yeah.
he does that. Like that is
He's a
something.
special breed of person. I don't
Yeah,
know. I think there's just
exactly.
certain people that just seem to just not care.
Yeah,
If I didn't want to be like a public, I'm not. This is why I would never tell my name on the internet. But like, if I
yeah.
didn't want to be a public-facing actor,
Hmm.
I absolutely would be doing debates online because I find it fun as fuck. But
Yeah. Well,
unfortunately, I have to like protect my like image.
I fucked up that one, didn't I? Rip.
Yeah. Um.
Unfortunate. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I feel you. That makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
Um,
I hate like you haven't listened to like the Doe conversation yet, but like, do you mind if I spoil like the first little bit?
sure, yeah, go for it.
Um. So like Rem's like basically Rem asks her like her it them. Okay, Rem asks
I'm just
them. Sorry.
defaulting to
Yeah.
them right now. You can use
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Rem
Yeah.
asks them. like, do you identify as a deer? And then they say no. But then he says, well, there's a tweet where you say, I identify as a deer. And then they said, oh, that was just a joke. And I'm so tired of that. Like, I hate this defense of
Oh God.
it's a joke. Like, it's so and like I think it was a bit spicy. But when Destiny obviously did the deer hunting tweet, I'm sure you probably saw that.
Yeah, and then immediately
They
turned
then
around and
said,
claimed.
"Oh, it's like a death threat," and I'm like, "Well, if you don't identify as a deer, why would you say it's a death threat?"
Yeah, like
So
if you actually don't believe it, then
mental gymnastics was just like, yeah, it's cringe.
yeah,
But
it's
anyway,
weird
yeah.
to say that
Okay,
like, oh, this is. Or sorry,
yeah.